Okay, let's get into that LifeSite news article I mentioned briefly in my last video, and just what the Equality Act means and what it will do, and the effects the Obama administration, EPA with Rafi Friedman Guzman advising had. Now, again, LifeSite posted this article on September of this year, and it's an opinion piece. However, the opinion piece is based on actual policy that was implemented during the Obama administration, and also policy that Joe Biden has articulated that he wants to reinstate. It just is what it is. So, LifeSite news article is titled, "A Scary Look at America's Possible Future Under a Biden Presidency." Under a Biden administration, we'll see a colossal escalation in the scope and power of government projected by authoritarian policies. William DiPuccio wrote the article, and it goes on as follows. September 29, 2020, American thinker, "The principle of limited government is at the heart of the American system. The founders believed that tyranny grows in proportion to power, threatening individual liberty. History is littered with innumerable examples of absolute despotism, to use the word of the Declaration of Independence, in which government exercises power against the people rather than for the people. The pivot of limited government is restraint. Under the Constitution, government is confined to those powers that protect life, liberty, and property. James Madison warned, it will not be denied that power is of an encroaching nature, and that it ought to be effectually restrained from passing the limits assigned to it." Federalist 48. Now, I kind of want to go down a little bit. Okay, despite accusations of fascism from the left, President Trump has attempted to scale back the power of government by eliminating or curtailing many federal regulations and by reducing the size of federal government and the federal workforce. He has made mistakes, to be sure, but in terms of actual policy, his critics are hard-pressed to cite substantive examples that amount to a pattern of tyranny and fascism. Instead, much of the criticism surrounds his sometimes reckless language and his verbal attacks on the press. Ironically, it was Barack Obama who abused government power by investigating, spying on, and harassing journalists. Under a Biden administration, we will see a colossal escalation in the scope and power of government projected by authoritarian policies, many of which were put in place under President Obama. The apparently available Biden is a progressive who believes that the primary purpose of government is to engineer social and economic structures in order to create a just society. Progressives have no limiting principles to restrain government growth because they are convinced that government is a benign agent of the people, a supremely naive belief according to the American founders. The prospect of authoritarian government under Biden is not a nebulous accusation, but a concrete extrapolation position and policy, extrapolation based on his record and his current position and policies. The examples that follow are drawn from this particular person's ebook, The War on Americans' Founding Principles, How Progressives Are Dismantling America One Plank at a Time. And I'm going to download that book and we're going to go into it. Biden has promised to sign the Equality Act into law. If it is passed by the Senate, here we go, the legislation limits religious freedoms by elevating LGBTQ rights, which for progressives takes precedence over the other rights. The Equality Act amends the 1964 Civil Rights Act to prohibit discrimination on the basis of sex, sexual orientation, and gender identity. Section 1107 specifically denies exemptions for religious freedom granted under the Religious Freedom Restoration Act of 1993. The Equality Act will force churches to open their sex-specific facilities, such as bathrooms, to members of the opposite sex. It would threaten creative professionals like Christian bakers, wedding photographers, and florists who would be forced against their deeply held religious beliefs to use their artistic skills in support of same-sex couples attempting to marry. In short, the Equality Act will force religious individuals and organizations to speak messages and act in ways that violate their beliefs under the threat of punishment. See, that's not equal and just. You don't have a right to not even encroach, but bombard anyone else's personal beliefs. You have a right to practice and believe what you have a right to practice and believe, but you don't have a right to force that on someone else. And when you start talking about opening up bathrooms and not being discriminated in healthcare, no transgendered individuals or LGBTQ individuals, specifically within the realm of healthcare, how can you? That's a question. How could you possibly be discriminated against? The only thing that I could think of, or a possible way I can think of, and I had read an article about this, and I'm going to bring it up and see if we can touch on it in this particular part 2 of this video. I read an article about transgenders wanting to have access to, transgender women wanting to have access to gynecologists, and my big question is, for what? They're different body parts. So the only way that I can see anyone from the LGBTQ community feeling discriminated against in terms of healthcare is if you're identifying as a specific gender, even though you're really not that specific gender. But they can't treat you based on the gender you're identifying with. They have to treat you based upon the gender you are. Yeah, they have to treat you based on the gender you are, not on the gender that you are identifying with. It's just a scientific, natural reality fact. And then that's where we get into the realm of psychology. And psychologists taking it out of their materia medica that LGBTQ or homosexuality is not, or transgender identity is not, body dysmorphia is not mental illness. Anybody going into a doctor's office thinking that if they are a specific sex because they identify as another one, that they can be treated by the sex that they are identifying with, that's a mental illness, and I don't mean to be offensive. So when we have psychologists out here condoning and promoting certain behaviors, it's a problem. And then you wonder why there are certain people that'll look at your medical field and call you quacks. Because scientific fact is based on natural reality or natural law. And once you deviate from that, you can't prove that which you're trying to, and you become labeled insane. The article goes on to read, the Equality Act will force religious individuals and organizations to speak messages and act in ways that violate beliefs under the threat of punishment. Biden will restore the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, forcing religious ministries and schools along with businesses operated by religiously devout owners to cover the insurance costs of birth control, drugs that can cause abortions. After a successful 9-year battle in court, systems against the Obama administration, the Little Sister of the Poor, a Catholic order of nuns, will find themselves in litigation again to protect their religious freedoms. Ironically, Biden claims to be a devout Catholic. But not just that, you can't petition an act. You can if you want to, but it's not just to petition an act for rights exclusively pertaining to a specific minority while violating rights to another. That's why I keep saying the Equality Act is unnecessarily red tape, because LGBTQ liberties, their liberties are already protected under the Civil Rights Act. They're already protected. If you go into a bakery that has a religious owner and they don't want to make a wedding cake for you, go find another bakery that will, or open your own. I mean, this is just common sense. You can't force people to do that which they don't believe in. I mean, there are people out there that do, but that's harassment. Not just harassment. What's the term, the legal term that I'm reaching for in thought? That's forcing someone to do something under duress. See, a lot of you LGBTQ community individuals, you're going to start getting sued. Because that which you claim others are doing to you, you are doing to others. And we're going to jump into the topic of private and public a bit in this article, and we'll talk a little bit more in depth of what and we'll talk more in depth of, about what that actually means. Okay, forced taxpayer funding of abortion. Biden will require taxpayers to fund abortions with no exceptions for conscience. Now, see, I personally don't believe in abortion. That's me. But I'm not going to tell you what you can do with your body. See, here goes that, free society concept. But I don't want to pay for what you choose to do with your body when it comes specifically to abortion. That's on you. That's on you. I know it's kind of hard when we go back and we talk about religious institutions not wanting to cover birth control and not wanting to cover medical insurance costs for abortion and things of that sort. I know that sounds stringent, but there are going to be some other public employers that will cover it, number one. And number two, if you don't want to have children, don't have sex. I mean, that's part of adulthood, to be able to refrain from bodily urges, because not all bodily urges are expedient. But in today's society, unfortunately, we have a lot of adult children running around, and government is not supposed to be there to force you to be an adult and behave civilly and have self-control. That's on you. That's on you. That's part of adulthood. The article goes on to read, Those who morally object to abortion as murder will be forced to subsidize it. Most Americans have opposed government funding of abortion, including Biden himself. Until recently, he supported the 1976 Hyde Amendment, which prohibits the use of federal funds to pay for abortions, with few exceptions. This long-standing agreement was in effect a truce between the two opposing and often hostile sides of the abortion debate. But Biden, under the influence of the radical left, has become far less tolerant and will settle for no middle ground when it comes to social justice. Just shadow justice system. Biden will restore Obama's guidance for college tribunals on sexual misconduct. In 2011, the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights established new mandates under the Obama administration, requiring colleges and universities that receive federal funding to dramatically reduce the due process rights of students accused of sexual misconducts. These include a reckless broad definition of sexual harassment, a low threshold of evidence for determining guilt, denial of the right of the accused to face his accuser, denial of the right of the accused to cross-examine witnesses, denial of the right to see all the evidence collected in the case, denial of the right to objective and impartial investigations, denial of the right of presumed innocence into proven guilty. What is the college? Its own country? Those are the basic rights of our judicial system. So what are these colleges now? They're their own country? They have their own, tribunals, and they're their own countries? This is insane. Absolutely insane. Okay, the article goes on to say these unjust regulations were rectified under the Trump administration to the accolades of civil rights organizations like FIRE. But Biden intends to reinstitute Obama's sham system. See, everybody thinks Obama was freaking the Messiah. He was not. He was doing some real dirt, and we gave him 8 years to do it. And now we're fighting to stop Trump from getting 8 years to reverse the chains. Very interesting. These shadowy tribunals give us a window into the progressive view of justice and how it would be applied in a progressive legal system. Discrimination against women. Biden will reinstate Obama's heavy-handed transgender bathroom directive. We were just talking about that in part 1 in my other video yesterday, and in my other video like 2 days ago. The federal government will order women and girls in public schools to permit males to use their bathroom, locker rooms, and showers. How smart is that? It's insane. This violates their inalienable right to fundamental bodily privacy and poses a safety risk. Duh. Girls and women's sports teams will be required to admit males who pretend to be females, even though they represent an unfair and unsurmountable advantage over females. Federal control of private property, which goes into what Rafi Friedman Gerspan was advising on under the Obama administration. She said she was working specifically with the EPA on regulations. Listen very closely. Federal control of private property. The barometer of encroaching authoritarianism is the consolidation of power. Whereas the founders sought to divide sovereignty between state and federal governments, federalism, progressives like Biden aspire to create a top-down system of control in order to implement their economic and social vision effectively, quashing the power of states, for example. Biden said he would shut down the country if necessary in order to stop the spread of coronavirus, even though the direct oversight of public health is not power delegated to the president or the federal government. Now you're wondering why, after that Texas lawsuit failed, because allegedly the U.S. Supreme Court says that they don't have standing, which is baffling to me. Specifically, they said they don't have a cognizant judicial reason I know. When I read the article, I said, what the hell? Yeah, you're wondering why so many states are talking about seceding and forming their own union that will obey the Constitution. And all I have to say is, if Biden is allowed to steal this election, and you do that, please let me know what states are in, because I'm moving if I have to, because this is crazy. This is completely asinine. Federal control of private property. They're literally pushing to abolish the Constitution. And most people don't know it, and most people don't know what that means. The article goes on to read, only the states have the power under the 10th Amendment to determine what is in the best interest of public health, and the police power to enforce it when necessary. Biden's attempt to consolidate power by running over the states is evident in environmental policies, which gives the federal government nearly plenary control over private property. Though each state has one or more agencies to monitor and regulate the quality of the environment, the EPA has assumed expansive powers to override state regulations on land, air, water, wildlife, and other natural resources. We can thank Rafi Friedman Gerspan for advising on that particular panel for these regulations under the Obama administration that will be implemented once again under a Biden, Harris, Clinton, Obama, Pelosi administration. The article goes on to read, under the Obama administration, this power was expanded further by giving the agency sweeping and unprecedented authority over streams and wetlands, even on private property. President Trump rolled back this usurpation of power, handing control back to the states. Biden, however, intends to reinstate Obama's authoritarian regulations. He will also establish an environmental and climate justice division in order to further consolidate federal power, using, in his words, an all-of-government approach. Federal control of local zoning. How it trickles down more into the people. Thanks, Rafi Friedman Gerspan. Federal control of local zoning and laws. Finally, under Joe Biden, the federal government will extend its tentacles to local neighborhoods by regulating zoning. His administration will end single-family zoning in many suburbs and create little downtowns in these communities by building high-density, low-income housing. Check your climate action plan. Research Deborah Tavares on YouTube. You'll find out more detailed information about this. I mentioned that in not part one of this particular vlog, but in the video I posted before that. The article goes on to read, this will effectively destroy the suburbs by merging them with large cities. And remember, you guys were all mad because Trump didn't want to put low income housing in suburbia. He's trying to keep our communities protected lawfully, and not segregated. And that word just came to my mind because many of you listening to this are probably going to think, oh yeah, he's trying to keep it segregated. No, he's not trying to keep it segregated, because black is not a skin color, it's a class status. And there are a lot of people that are walking around with light skin that are of a black class status. That's another topic for another day. But when you have to reside in these low-income communities, sometimes crime is rampant. People move out. They work up so they can move out of the low-income areas into suburbia to have a different, better quality of life. You can be mad at me for saying it if you want to. I really don't care. But that is what reality is. And when they stack up enough to move out of suburbia, they might snatch themselves some land and move out into the country for an even better quality of life. But under a Joe Biden administration, they want to haul everybody into these low density, high density downtowns type of community. Deborah Alvarez calls them kill cities. Because remember, also under the progressive far left Democratic banner, they want to do away with cars, they want to do away with airplanes, they want to do away with all oil, coal, everything. So you're going to be trapped in these high density cities. work, sleep, eat. That's it. The article goes on to read, in keeping with the authoritarian nature of this program, suburbs that refuse to comply will be cut off from millions of dollars in HUD grants and possibly from critically needed federal transportation grants used to build and repair state highways. Though Joe Biden presents himself as a moderate, his authoritarian policies betray a more radical progressive philosophy that is gradually undermining and replacing America's social, political, and economic fabric. Biden's administration will have no limiting principle to restrain the growth of government power. By further consolidating control, he will hasten the erosion of numerous constitutional rights, inching us closer to tyranny. As James Madison warned, there are more instances of the abridgment of the freedom of the people by gradual and silent encroachments of those powers than by violent and sudden usurpations. But they're doing it violently today too, aren't they? I wanted to talk to you guys about 3 more topics.